We're going to move on to questions about education, and we'll go now to Sasha Ryan.
Judith from our audience had a question about how you'll handle schools. So, can you tell us whether you feel Michigan schools have what they need, the resources they need to succeed and to serve all of their students, including students with special needs? And also, do you feel Michigan schools are funded equitably?
Well, first, Sasha, I want to congratulate you and thank you for all the great work you've done with Detroit Public Schools and all of your research and your articles. Education was the ladder for my success. I grew up in poverty, and I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in chemistry, and I immigrated to the United States to get a PhD in chemistry back in 1979. So I understand the importance of education. And our education today has become a privilege. It's become so expensive. A lot of that has to do with funding. We need to put more funds in our K-12. We need to make our teachers, pay our teachers as the professionals that they are, provide them enough support staff like counseling, mental health counseling in schools, career counseling. We need to invest in early childhood education. I have a grandson who is 18 months old, and I see how young children learn. And we're always worried about third grade math and fourth grade reading. But my focus is going to be taking early childhood education to 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, teach them the math skills, the reading skills that they need, and begin investing our children very early in their life.
Can I ask where the money would come from that you want to invest?
Good question. So the current funding model is not working. I want to have the funding based on need-based. So students in public schools the schools that have higher needs because, say for example, charter schools, when they take students away from our public schools, it leaves behind harder to train students. And sometimes, especially Detroit public schools, there are a number of schools that have higher needs, and I want to make sure that the funding is in proportion to that. Some of my funding would come from a graduated income tax, where the rich and the ultra-rich and the corporations will pay their fair share in terms of contributing to our revenue stream. The passage of the recreational marijuana bill, which I support, will generate about $125 million. Some of that money should be earmarked for the school fund. So I'm proposing a education bank where the money that's put in there cannot be used to balance the budget or administrative cost, but should be earmarked specifically for school funding.
So I want to ask, we are coming to understand really that tests in school are measuring more socioeconomic things than perhaps academic things. Should then the accountability standards, the way we measure schools, the way we hold schools accountable, should they be measured by these tests? Is there another way they should be measured? And should they then affect whether and how the state approaches school closings?
Again, I want to minimize the testing. I think we're doing way too much testing that goes on. I would keep just one kind of testing 3 times a year, and I want to use the testing for measuring the progress year over year. I would not use the testing to evaluate the teachers or close down the school districts. Often I've met with many teachers, I've had conversations, and what I have seen is that because the teachers are so afraid of the test results, that a lot of their teaching is focused on students getting and doing better in test scores. And I want the teachers to focus on real learning. I want our children, when they get out of high school, and assuming they don't want to go to 4-year college, they should be able to go in the marketplace and be able to find good paying jobs. And what that means is then that we need to give them the skill set that they need, whether it is technical education, vocational skills in middle schools or high schools. So we need to give them the skill set, and our education needs to have a curriculum. Not only it fits with a child's aptitude, but the curriculum must also allow and empower the child to be able to go in the marketplace and be gainfully employed.
Should the decision to close a school rest with the state?
The issue about school closing is that we should focus more on investing in that school. We should look at creating an infrastructure, a support structure where the children can prosper. And school closing is not a solution. If a school is failing, that means we have failed. We have failed to adequately fund that school. We have failed to provide them the support staff that they need. It means we have failed to provide them the funds they need for their science projects or their security for the schools. So we really need to look at schools and see why they are failing, and we need to provide them the resources. We need to help them as opposed to do this testing in a punitive way to close down schools or let go teachers.
Steve Carmody from Michigan Radio has the next question on education.
Yes.
Hello. The Detroit Public School Community District, the largest district in the state, recently released a report estimating the cost of bringing school buildings up to standard, and it would cost about $500 million to do. Now, the state, the deal that the district cut with the state prevents it from raising money like other districts. How much of that $500 million is a responsibility of the state to cover to bring these buildings up to standard, or should the state make it easier for the district to borrow money to pay for that?
I think the answer is both. There should be some state funding, but the local government should have freedom. Local school districts should have the freedom to raise revenues locally. But the important thing is that we invest in schools, and we bring all the levels of all of our schools at the same level. I've been to schools that look like a 5-star hotel, and then I have seen schools where it rains outside. You start seeing it's raining or snowing inside the classroom. So some of the schools are in bad shape, and we need to strengthen our public education. If our public education is strong, then our communities are strong. Once our public education, our schools in the neighborhood become good, families will move into the neighborhood. Businesses will move into neighborhoods. So it all starts with education. I want to be the best education governor Michigan ever had, and that means we start with investing, and that means we fund it on a need basis, not on a zip code basis.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up. If Detroit needs that much help, how much should taxpayers in Grand Rapids, Mount Pleasant, and the UP be contributing to improve Detroit schools? Well,
this governor came to Lansing saying he wants to run the state as a business. And a state is not a business. You're dealing with people's lives. You're looking at children's lives. And even though I'm a business person, I have run businesses in the past, I come to this job looking at this job as running a state like a family. And when you talk about running a state like a family, as a head of a family, if a child has special needs, we go give extra love and care and compassion to that child. in the same way, we are all in this together. Michigan is one big family, and we need to look at each other. We need to look out for each other, and we need to contribute. And so I would not want regions to think more protective way for their own regions, but we need to chip in to make it better for, and maybe Detroit would help the other areas at other times. But we are all in this together, and I would like to run our state like a one big family.
We're going to move on now to some questions about charter schools, and Hassan has our question about that.
Do you think Michigan should make any changes to laws regarding how charter schools are governed?
Absolutely. One is we need to hold high standards of accountability for charter schools, just like we would hold for public schools. We also must make sure that no one profits from our public school dollars. So I would like to gradually transition the for-profit charter schools to not-for-profit schools. That's one of the things that I would do. I am a proponent of choice. I have no problem with having choice for parents on where they send their children and what kind of education they get. But we need to ensure that our school dollars are not going into the pockets of corporations as profits.
So then you wouldn't support continuing to fund charter schools with the same money allocated for public schools?
Again, I want the funding to be more on a need basis. So we need to revise this formula and use the limited resources the state has to provide them in proportion to the local needs. If we can bring some of our underperforming, severely underperforming schools up to an average standard of what we would expect, the entire level of Michigan's education will go up, and we can take Michigan education in the top 10 if we can focus on severely underperforming schools.
Sasha Ryan?
How would you make preschool and childcare more available and accessible and affordable in Michigan?
Well, I am proposing that we have a universal childcare, and I'm proposing that we have a universal pre-K. So this will be a state-funded program. It is designed to help parents get back in the workforce. Since in the last 15 years, 300,000 women have been out of workforce because they cannot afford childcare. Each cost of each child for childcare is ranging up to $10,000 a year, and that has become prohibitive for many women to be able to acquire gainful employment. So my focus is on once the paid family leave gets passed, we will have early childhood education as well as early childhood childcare. We will also raise, I want to raise the minimum wage to $15 and tie that to inflation. All of that would help working families, and it will all help the single mothers and single fathers. And I know that I was a single father, and I raised my children when I lost my first wife, and I raised my children when they're 4 and 8 years old. So I understand what a single parent goes through, and I want to help them with a universal child care and a universal pre-K.
And we got a question about higher education from Sandra Svoboda.
We've covered a little bit about K-12, and that was early childhood, so I'm interested in higher education. If you think the cost of it in Michigan is prohibitive now, and what, as governor, you could and would do about that.
Well, that's true. We need to make college education affordable. My plan includes making community college tuition free for all families. Again, education is critical in having and creating a skilled workforce. As you know, Amazon did not take our $4 billion incentive offer. They said, go fix your education. You don't have enough skilled workforce. And that's what I would focus on. I would make college affordable to any family that makes $120,000 or less should be able to send their children to college tuition free. I would have incentives if the graduates stay in Michigan and work in Michigan. If they stay in Michigan and go into the teaching profession, then I would forgive their college debt over time. And if they, stay in Michigan or start businesses and create jobs in Michigan, then I would also forgive their college debt over a period of time.
Could you talk a little more about how you would pay for that? Money has to come from somewhere. How would you raise the revenue to pay for that from the state level, or how would you cut expenses somewhere else in the state budget?
Well, certainly we need to look at. We have a $56 billion budget. We spend over almost $2.5 billion on prison system. I want to do prison reform. I want to find a way for non-violent offenders to pay their dues to the society in an alternate manner. We're spending $41,000 per prisoner, and we only have $9,000 or less per student, which that math just doesn't work for me. We need to have a savings there. We need to save on the corporate giveaways and tax incentives. I want to certainly ask for a 30-year, $30 billion statewide municipal bond to pay for some of the infrastructure improvements. Certainly the money and the additional revenue coming from marijuana recreational use should also be used for in the school fund. So it will be a combination of some tax increases on the rich and the ultra-rich and corporations, some tax giveaways. For example, any family that makes $50,000 or less, I will eliminate state income tax for those families. So, however, we're going to reduce and eliminate the state income tax for families making $50,000 or less, but then we are going to raise taxes for the rich and the ultra-rich and corporations who are not paying their fair share. So there will be multiple ways I would generate revenues. Now, having run small businesses, I have an understanding about finances, and I'm the only gubernatorial candidate that has created jobs and run in a private sector and run businesses. So I come to the job with that knowledge.